In some previous videos, we've talked about a supply curve. We've talked about what a supply curve tells us, how to plot a supply curve, why a supply curve shifts, all kinds of things. And what we want to do in this video is do some practice questions to reinforce what we've learned. And the first question we're going to look at is this. How does that supply curve change as the price of the good rises? And before trying to answer this, I want you to note some things. I want you to note what this y-axis is. The y-axis is the price of the good. The x-axis is the quantity of the good. And this question, what it's asking you, if price goes up, does, say, supply shift to the left like this, or does it maybe shift to the right like that? Might want to pause and think about how you would answer this question. And the answer to this question is as follows. The answer is that, well, it's a trick question. The supply curve doesn't change. And think about what the supply curve tells us. Like if price is 2 and then price goes up to 5, the supply curve tells us that we're moving from point A over here to point B. So when price rises, we're moving along the demand curve. So the supply curve doesn't shift, we move along it. Similarly, if price fell from 7 down to 5, we move from C down to B. And when price goes down, we again move along the demand curve. Supply curve. Question 2. I'll start you off with a supply curve here, the blue line. Now I'm going to draw two other supply curves. One that starts at the same intercept and has a steeper slope, S prime. Another one that's a parallel shift, S prime prime. And so the question is, if S is the original supply curve, which of the curves, S or S prime, shows a decrease in supply? Is it S prime, or is it S prime prime, or is it both? And pause it here if you want to think about it before you hear the answer. The answer is that both supply curves represent a decrease in supply, because in both situations at any price, let's say price of 6, at S prime and at S prime prime, you're going to be producing less than you would under the original supply curve S. So anytime a supply curve moves to the left, whether it's a parallel shift or not, that's a decrease in supply. For number 3, we're going to be looking at the supply of pork. And our question is, we know that corn is an input into pork production because you feed the hogs corn. How does that supply curve S change if corn prices fall? So think about how you would take that supply curve and how you would draw it differently to represent the supply of pork when now it's cheaper to buy the corn that you feed the hogs. Well, the answer is that anything that shifts the supply curve to the right will be the proper shift. So it could be something like this, a parallel shift to the right or close to parallel. It could be something like this where the intercept stays the same, but the supply curve is less steep. Or it could even be a combination of those two. Something like this. Both the intercept falls and the slope becomes less steep. Any of those supply curve, S prime, S prime prime, or S prime prime prime, would be correct answers to this question. For a fourth question, we're going to say that we're looking at the supply of corn. And I'm telling you here that the marginal cost curve for corn equals 2 plus 1/2 times Q. That means if we plot this, it'll go something like this. That's the marginal cost curve. And number 4 has two parts. The first one says, what is the marginal cost of the 4th unit? Well, one way of doing this is just looking here. Take the 4th unit, read across what the marginal cost is. And it turns out to be 4. The answer is $4. Our next question, our next part of number 4 is going to be a little tougher. It says, how much will be produced if the price is $5.25? Well, one thing we need to remember is that the marginal cost curve is also the supply curve. So the supply curve will tell us how much is produced. But one problem here is that we can't just come across the 5.5 and read it across on the curve. It just doesn't work. So we're going to have to use algebra. We learned from a previous video that the amount produced is you find the price and you read across and find where it equals marginal cost and then find the quantity associated with that. That's a little tougher here, but think about it. All we have to do is wherever we see marginal cost, we plug in price. So marginal cost equals price, $5.25 equals 2 plus 1/2 times quantity. So to figure out what quantity is, all we have to do is use a little algebra. And what we do is we say 5.25 minus 2 equals 0.5 times Q, which is 3.25 divided by 0.5 equals Q, and that is going to equal 6.5 units. So there's our answer, and that concludes these practice questions.